On this episode of ResiWeek, Access Networks has a new CEO, remote work, as well as LG's new QNED. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 258, Longer Runways.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Access Networks.
Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, we are pleased to be joined by my good friend, Bryce Nordstrom. He is the new CEO of Access Networks. How you doing, Bryce?
I'm good. How about you?
I am doing fantastic. Just a little housekeeping before we jump in. We're going to chat with Bryce real quickly about some cool changes that are going on at Access Networks, and then we're going to jump into the panel. So stick around, of course, after we talk to Bryce. We're going to kick this off as I alluded to into your introduction. Bryce is the new CEO over at Access. So first of all, congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
It's a fantastic thing. For both you and for the company. Give us a little backstory for anybody who maybe hasn't interfaced with you yet, or doesn't know a ton about Access Networks.
Sure. So, I mean, my personal experience has been I've been kind of in the AV industry for the last, I guess it's been residential now. It's been 14, 15 years. Before that, I was in car audio. There's a lot of guys out there like me that started out in car audio and decided that they wanted to make a little bit bigger paycheck because there's definitely more money on this side of the fence than there is in car audio. But outside of that, you know, I've been with Access for a little over 7 years now, coming up on 8 years. And with Access Networks, you know, we're a provider of residential network equipment and products and services, and have been doing that since 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. Yeah. So that was Guy Feiner, who was the CEO until just recently, and he started the company and now is the president and the founder of, and the big vision behind Access Networks. So yeah, it's been a great ride.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because, you know, obviously you and I have chatted quite a lot over the years. We do a lot of interviews at a lot of the different shows with you, so you're no stranger to our audience by any means. Making a transition into a role that was held by Haggai, who, let's be honest, he's a big personality. He's a big guy just in general. Those are big shoes to fill. How do you go about making that transition, and, you know, not only doing that internally with the other members of the company, but also externally to all of your dealers and all of your industry partners, and making a seamless transition?
Seamless is probably a little bit aggressive. I mean, to have no seam in there was going to be difficult. You know, it's something that a guy and I talked about 2.5 years ago. He was actually doing my review, and he asked me where I thought I wanted to be in a couple years, 3 years, and I turned it around on him and I said, "Where do you want to be?" And he was taken aback by that because he never really thought about it. I don't think he'd always just, you know, I'm going to be the owner, I'm going to be the CEO for the rest of the time, and that is what it is. And I think when I asked him that question, because I told him I wanted to be CEO at that point. And I think when I asked him that question, he just kind of the wheels started turning, like, what else would I like to do? What else could I do? And we started laying that groundwork pretty soon after that was a possible transition that would happen at some point. There wasn't any time frame put on it or anything like that. There was no, you know, like, hey, you know, this date we're going to do this, and this date we're going to do that, and so on and so forth. It was just, if it works out and it makes sense, then that's where we'll end up. And, you know, Haggai has a lot of really big ideas and comes up with some pretty, you know, he really has a pulse of the market, and just kind of understands what people are looking for. And a lot of people at Access Networks have that same kind of ability, but then when it came down to actually executing things, you know, I was the sales guy. I had to move the sales number, right? I had to move everything forward, figure out how to get that move forward. So when somebody comes to you and says, I have this idea, my brain starts working about, okay, how do we implement that? How do we get it done? How do we move that in? And luckily, there's a bunch of other people at Access Networks that work the same way. And I had started taking more of that role outwardly facing for the company of bringing new products, of being the spokesperson about who Access Networks is, what our position is, what the products that we do, what our services are, those kind of things. And so it was just kind of this natural transition of, I'll just come up with some big ideas every now and then you go figure out how to make it all work. And so that's kind of where we're at now. And I think he's happy to be able to take on some other initiatives that he has in his life, and I'm happy to embrace this role and see where we go next.
I want to get into some of those kind of growth opportunities and market side of things for a second. But just before we do, one of the things with, somebody like Haggai being involved so much and being that figurehead, how do you go through, working with someone who has been obviously the boss for so long and making that move to, coming up from where you were in the sales role to then being a part of those conversations and being a part of those ideas?
I think it's the explicit trust that he's put in me. Okay. And that trust wasn't just external. That was an internal message that he has been working on for a while. When we would have business discussions or discussions about, where we're heading or what we're doing, a lot of times he and I would be very locked up and in sync from day one. We see things very vividly the same way. And I think the internal message has always been, this is what we're going to do, and Bryce is going to help us get there. And there was a lot of things that I pushed the envelope on. The other thing that I'm not afraid and never have been afraid to do is talk to him like another owner, because I've been an owner of other companies. Yeah. And so that's a little bit different for some business owners to actually have somebody that actually comes up to them as an owner, even though they're not, and says what they think. There's probably a dozen times over the years where I've said, okay, I'm going to say this to him, and I may not have a job tomorrow. So, it's wearing it, it's being open and honest and wearing it all out there and believing in what you're saying. So
that's a huge part, though, to be able to take ownership without being an owner. Right. And that's something that you don't rarely see, which is fantastic. And, I applaud you for that. Let's talk for a second about growth. This is the thing I've loved about Access Networks, following you guys for so long. And I'm trying to think back to when I first met Haggai and how long ago that was. And I want to say it was really early. It was a couple of the first, if not the first, CD Expo that they exhibited at. You guys as a company have really kind of developed this internet IT base that the industry's latched onto, right? I know there's other vendors, and I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but you guys really push that envelope heavily. As the industry continues to push really heavily on and lean on infrastructure, where does that put you guys? Where does that put Access Networks, and what's the future for Access Networks look like?
Yeah, so every 2 or 3 years, probably, we look at the market and we go, okay, well, there's this technology coming, and maybe that ends our runway. Maybe there's this technology coming, maybe that ends our runway. And the reality is that none of them really do. They all make the runway longer. And we are just scratching, as an industry, we are just scratching the surface of security services. Yeah. Security as a service to residential to residential end users. And that's something that, we've got an offering out there. We've got multiple in the pipeline that are revolving around that. And it's such an untapped potential in our industry. And the biggest issue that we see moving forward is convenience versus security. And that's always going to be a problem on the residential side. People with their businesses, they don't, they're only there 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day. They don't mind being a little bit inconvenienced because of some security measures that somebody put in place. But when they go home, what they want is convenience. They want that ultimate convenience. They want to be able to just, turn it on and go and not worry about, approving this or worrying about this not downloading or that not opening or those kind of things. And so that's the thing that's going to take some time for our industry, is to really fine tune that stuff and actually do it with a level of security that is robust enough to protect you. Because there's lots of little things out there that you can do to, URL filtering and those kind of things. And,
Right.
And those things are out there now, but the problem is that they're not really protecting you from the threats that are available, that are out there now, that are so much more complex and complicated and more aggressive than you would ever believe. You talk to some of these companies that really protect Fortune 500 type companies, and the stuff that they're seeing out there is just insane. I mean, look at this last thing that we saw in the news with SolarWinds. These are very, very smart people behind these attacks, and that will eventually happen in the residential space. There will eventually be somebody that gets accessed in a way that it ruins lives and those kind of things. And so what we're really trying to do is we're really trying to get ahead of that curve, right? We're really trying to get ahead of that curve and figure out, how can we apply what they're applying to the residential or to the commercial space and to the enterprise space, but do it in a way that still allows some kind of convenience to it. And
Is that?
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, it's not something where you just flip a switch and now it works. It's something that's going to be a learned process. And that's where we think there's a huge potential there in the market, on top of all of the new technologies that are coming out, behind Wi-Fi and the devices that are being added to the market.
Is that arguably the toughest hurdle right now in the industry, is how to? I remember years ago, you and I talked about the advent of commercial grade appliances, essentially, in network terms, coming into the home, and how there was occasionally pushback on that because, well, we don't need that massive, Cisco switch or access network switch or whatever it is at the time. Is the security that type of conversation as well, where it's arguably, I would agree with you, it's probably the biggest potential, but it's also maybe the hardest avenue to go down. It'll
Right.
be met with the most resistance.
Yeah, it is. There's some things that are working in our favor right now, specifically work from home.
Mm-hmm.
That's exposing a lot of weaknesses on residential networks and what the attack vectors are that are available now. I mean, take your business that was centrally located and there was 500 people in an office building, and take all of those 500 people and put them in their houses. And how many more attack vectors have you just created by moving those people into their homes? Where their desktop is sitting unlocked for an hour because they got up and went to get some lunch, and they have a house cleaner in the house that's punching buttons, or they have their kids that are, like zooming pictures of themselves out, or whatever the case may be, right? That these are the kind of things that become more and more as we move forward into the work from home as being the normal, because there's a lot of companies that are saying they're not going to put a lot of people back in offices. They're going to allow them to continue to work from home. That's, schooling from home, all of these different things. And yeah, there's this huge potential, and it's always going to come down to training people, because human error is one of the biggest potential threats in residential or in network attacks, right? So clicking on something that you weren't supposed to click on, so on and so forth. And then what are the services that we can create and the products that we can provide that will actually allow somebody to have some level of convenience while still having a level of protection that makes sense for their lifestyle.
Yeah,
it's a very difficult thing to find, and there's no magic bullet. There's no one thing you just put your finger on it and say that's the thing. It takes some time. So, in some respect, we say bear with us, because it does take some time to figure this stuff all out.
Yeah, and it's constantly evolving, of course.
Right. Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Let's change topics real quickly before I let you go. One of the things that in not only the press release, but also just the way you guys have have managed this transition that I absolutely love is you're not the only one who got a promotion. Obviously, we're talking to you, and again, congratulations. But there's a group of people that are moving up and that are adding on. Talk for a minute about how essentially effective but also encouraging it is to be able to not only move up yourself, but see others within the company continue to grow and excel.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the most rewarding parts of being in some type of leadership position in the company, whether it's, this level or a level 2 levels ago or whatever it is. When you see people that come in and they've made an obvious difference in the performance of the company and how we work and what the benefits are, and they've come into the company. A lot of times when we've brought them in just because of who they are. You take Alicia, Alicia well.
Yeah.
Take Alicia Henley as an example. She's not a ton of experience in residential and very little experience in networking as a whole. But look at her. I mean, she's killing it. She is a rock star on our team.
Totally. Yep.
And she's very visible in the market, and she has deserved she deserves the accolades and the respect that she gets. And she's a top-notch person, and that's what we look for over anything else, is top-notch people. If somebody's intelligent and a go-getter and has a never say die attitude kind of thing, and is focused on details, you can train them to do a lot of things, with the right people and we feel like we have that foundation already created. So it's really about the people more than it is about what they're doing. And we've had several people in the company that they weren't in the right position. And we look at that person and we go, okay, so what we know about them is they can do this, this, and this. So what can they do for Access Networks? Because we don't want to lose the person.
Mm-hmm.
We want to put them in a place where they can contribute, empower them to be better, empower them to make a difference, empower them to feel fulfilled, to do all of those things. And we've made those transitions. We've moved people around because we don't want to lose the person. And I think that's the fulfilling part about being in leadership is making sure that when you're looking back at all the people that you've brought on over the years, that you're saying, okay, those people have made a huge impact, and they feel fulfilled, and they feel like part of the culture, and they feel rewarded by the fact that the company has given them the opportunities that they've needed to do and thrive that way. So that's more rewarding to me than a lot of the other things that we do as a company. The sales figures and all that thing are great to pay the paychecks, but seeing people succeed is a great thing. So
I will say that, again, having followed the company for years, that is, as much as you've had fantastic success as a network company, the leadership principles and the way in which as a company you guys work has just been fantastic to watch. And
thank you.
Again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for spending a minute with us. Again, congratulations. And we're looking forward to everything else that Access Networks is going to do in the future.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching the first segment of this week's episode. To catch the entire show, please click the link below or visit avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.